The Banshee, known in Irish as Banshee, meaning fairy woman or woman of the mound, is a prominent figure in Irish folklore, often regarded as a harbinger of death. Her chilling wails and cries are said to announce the impending death of a family member, typically someone from old Irish families with names like O'Connor, O'Neill, O'Brien, O'Grady, and Kavanagh. While her appearances may inspire fear, the Banshee is not a malicious spirit but rather a mourner, tasked with forewarning the family about a coming tragedy. The legend of the Banshee is rich in cultural significance and is deeply intertwined with ancient Irish beliefs about death, the afterlife, and the spiritual world. As a figure both feared and respected, the Banshee occupies a unique place in the mythology of Ireland, blending elements of ghost stories, fairy tales, and cultural customs surrounding mourning and death. Origins and historical context. The Banshee is an ancient myth, with roots tracing back to pre-Christian Celtic traditions. In early Irish mythology, the Tuatha Dé Danann, a race of divine beings, were believed to have magical powers and inhabited the hills and mounds of Ireland. After their defeat by the Milesians, the Tuatha Dé Danann were said to retreat underground, becoming known as the Ouse Sea or fairy folk. The Banshee, as a member of this mystical race, is often seen as a supernatural being who belongs to the same world as fairies, spirits, and other otherworldly entities. The Banshee's association with death likely stems from ancient burial and mourning customs. In early Irish society, keeners, women who would sing mourning songs, or caoined, keenings, at funerals, were an essential part of the grieving process. These women would wail and lament the deceased, expressing the sorrow of the community. The Banshee, in many ways, is a supernatural keener, whose cries signify not only mourning but the approach of death itself. Over time, the Banshee evolved into a more spectral figure, with her keening becoming a sign of impending death rather than mourning the dead. The connection between the Banshee and certain Irish families also has historical roots. Many of the old Irish noble families, particularly those with names, claim to have ancestral spirits watching over them. These families believed that the Banshee's wail was not a curse but rather a protective warning. In this way, the legend of the Banshee reflects both the deeply personal and communal aspects of death in Irish culture. Description of the Banshee. The Banshee's appearance and manner of manifestation can vary depending on the source or regional interpretation. However, certain key characteristics remain consistent across most accounts. Physical appearance. The Banshee is often described as a woman, but her form can shift between different appearances. In some tales, she is a beautiful young woman, with flowing silver or white hair and dressed in a pale gown or cloak, symbolizing purity and mourning. This version of the Banshee is ethereal, gliding silently through the air or standing at a distance, her presence felt rather than seen. In other versions, the Banshee takes on the form of an old, withered hag, her hair wild and her eyes red from weeping. This crone-like figure is more directly associated with the horrors of death and decay. Her physical appearance may be grotesque or terrifying, reflecting the inevitable decay that follows death. There are also depictions of the Banshee as a woman dressed in traditional Irish garb, such as a long cloak or burial shroud. She may also be seen brushing her long hair with a silver comb, an image that has given rise to the superstition in Ireland that finding a comb on the ground is a sign of bad luck, as it might belong to the Banshee. Cry or wail. The most defining feature of the Banshee is her keening cry, a mournful wail that is said to be so chilling and sorrowful that it freezes the blood of those who hear it. This cry can vary in intensity and pitch, sometimes described as a soft, sorrowful moan, and at other times as a piercing scream. Manifestation. The Banshee can appear in different ways depending on the family she visits or the region in which the story is told. In some tales, she appears as a shadowy figure near the home of the dying person, while in others, she is seen standing near a river or crossroads, places traditionally associated with the supernatural. The Banshee may also be heard but not seen, her presence marked only by the haunting cry that fills the night air. Accompanying spirits. In some versions of the legend, the Banshee is not alone. She is sometimes accompanied by other spirits or fairy women who assist in the keening, especially when the death is of a great or noble person. These spirits may also be associated with the Bean City, the fairy women of Irish folklore who inhabit the mounds and hills of Ireland. The role of the Banshee in Irish culture. The Banshee serves as a death omen in Irish folklore, but her role goes beyond simply being a bearer of bad news. In many ways, she is seen as a guardian or protector of the families she watches over. Her wail is a signal to prepare for death, allowing the family to say their final goodbyes or make peace with the inevitable. Unlike other malevolent spirits or monsters, the Banshee does not cause death, she merely announces it. The Banshee's connection to specific families is a testament to the importance of lineage and heritage in Irish society. Traditionally, she was said to follow noble families, such as the O'Neills and O'Briens, acting as a family spirit who would warn them of a death in their ranks. Over time, the belief spread to other families, and the Banshee became a more generalized figure in Irish folklore. In some interpretations, the Banshee is seen as a figure of grief and mourning, representing the sorrow that comes with loss. Her keening reflects the deep emotional pain that families experience when a loved one dies, and in this sense, she serves as an external manifestation of the family's inner grief. Her presence at the time of death also reflects the Irish belief in the supernatural and the afterlife, where the boundary between the living and the dead is thin, and spirits can cross over to communicate with the living. Regional variations of the Banshee. While the Banshee is most commonly associated with Irish folklore, variations of her legend can be found in other Celtic cultures, such as Scotland and Wales. Each region has its own unique interpretation of the Banshee, with slight differences in her appearance, role, and significance. Scotland, in Scottish folklore, the Banshee is sometimes referred to as the bean nigh, or washerwoman at the ford. The bean nigh is seen washing the blood-stained clothes of those who are about to die, and like the Irish Banshee, her presence is a death omen. However, the bean nigh is not always associated with wailing or keening, and in some tales, she can be approached and questioned about who is going to die. She is also sometimes depicted as a more pitiful figure, cursed to wash clothes for eternity. Wales, in Welsh folklore, there is a similar figure known as the Cywyryth or Grach y Ribbon, who is also a harbinger of death. Like the Banshee, the Cywyryth's cry foretells death, but she is often depicted as a hag-like figure who appears in the night, wailing for the souls of the soon-to-be deceased. Modern interpretations and influence on pop culture. The Banshee's influence has spread beyond Irish folklore and into popular culture and modern media. She has appeared in various books, movies, and television shows, often as a spectral figure associated with death or the supernatural. In these interpretations, the Banshee is typically portrayed as a fearsome or tragic figure, whose cries evoke both horror and sympathy. One of the most well-known portrayals of the Banshee in popular culture is in the world of comic books, particularly in the X-Men series, where a superhero named Banshee possesses sonic powers linked to the mythical figure's cry. Although this portrayal is far removed from the traditional legend, it demonstrates how the Banshee has become a symbol of powerful, often uncontrollable emotion. The Banshee also frequently appears in horror films and supernatural thrillers, where her wailing cry is used to create a sense of dread and impending doom. In some cases, the Banshee is portrayed as a vengeful spirit, though this interpretation diverges from the more traditional view of her as a mourner rather than a malevolent entity. Additionally, the Banshee has become a popular figure in video games and fantasy literature, where her connection to death and the afterlife often makes her a character associated with magic, prophecy, or spiritual powers. The enduring legacy of the Banshee. The legend of the Banshee has endured for centuries, evolving from its origins in ancient Celtic beliefs to become one of the most well-known figures in Irish mythology. Her role as a harbinger of death speaks to universal themes of mortality, grief, and the fear of the unknown. In a world where death is often unpredictable and sudden, the Banshee offers both a warning and a form of comfort, a signal that death is near, but that it is part of the natural order of life. For the people of Ireland, the Banshee remains a potent symbol of the mystical and spiritual aspects of life and death. Whether seen as a fairy, a ghost, or a personification of grief, the Banshee continues to capture the imagination of those who hear her legend, reminding us of the deep connection between the living and the dead, and the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding.